A couple of days ago, the court released the written version of the order denying the Alec Baldwin's motion to dismiss the indictment for failure to allege a criminal offense. I believe that this here is a typo. That's supposed to say a criminal offense. Failure to allege a criminal offense. Okay. And so now we already knew that this was denied. The judge denied it on the spot at the end of the oral hearing, oral arguments at the hearing. But of course, they have to release the written statement. Everything needs to be in writing and the legal scene in case this gets appealed. The appeals court's got to have something to refer to. Okay, so the defense was asking for the indictment to be thrown out completely on the basis that even if they granted all of the facts that the state was alleging, it still doesn't add up to a crime. The argument being that Alec Baldwin, because he didn't know that there were live rounds on set, much less live rounds in the gun, that he didn't have the subjective knowledge required that there was a substantial and unjustified risk of his behavior. They didn't win that motion, so it's going to go to trial. So basically, let's read some of this. So here in this paragraph number 8, these are kind of the core points of why the defense thought that he doesn't have the subjective knowledge. The state asserted it was incomprehensible that live rounds would be on the movie set. Okay, so if it's incomprehensible live rounds are on the movie set, how can Alec Baldwin have any knowledge that his actions are creating a substantial and unjustified risk? The state suggested that the firearm safety was the sole responsibility of the armor. So this came into play in the Hannah Gutierrez trial when they called the witness Brian Carpenter. They asked Brian Carpenter, whose responsibility is it to ferret out live rounds on set, and he said it's the armor's responsibility. And so that's kind of what they're getting at with number 2 here. The witnesses testified that it had been checked by the assistant director, okay, and that the assistant director announced cold gun, which when he gave it to Alec Baldwin, which led everyone in the church, so it's not just Alec Baldwin, to believe that it only contained dummy rounds. So these things, again, the defense has said over and over again, Alec Baldwin didn't have the subjective knowledge of a substantial and unjustified risk that he was ignoring, and therefore he didn't have the requisite mens rea to commit involuntary manslaughter. The state pushed back in the response to this motion, the original. We're just looking at the dismissal now. I'm not showing the original motion and then the state's response to the motion. But the state brought up some new arguments in their response. One of the things they brought up, which is mentioned here in the order to dismiss, that Alec Baldwin had reason to believe that Halls only periodically checked the gun. So this is kind of a new argument and something that's not really argued on social media. People say, the things people say, you never point a gun at anyone. That's a common argument on social media. Alec Baldwin didn't verify the gun. Your gun handler is always responsible for what's in the gun. That's an argument on social media. And then some people will say, yeah, but he was a producer, so he was responsible, blah, blah, blah. So those are kind of the common arguments. But here we have a new argument which comes from a police interview of Alec Baldwin where he made an offhand comment that said Halls would periodically check the gun. Well, if he periodically checks the gun, that implies that he periodically doesn't check the gun. And if he doesn't check the gun, and Alec Baldwin knew that, so that's going to be an interesting argument at trial, is how much hay the state can make out of that, and then what the defense is going to be on that. Now, to my knowledge, so this is actually probably one of the better arguments. I mean, I've been arguing for 2 years that I don't think Alec Baldwin should be found guilty on this. But this argument, if the state could show that Alec Baldwin, knew that Halls was a bad assistant director and he was sloppy in checking the gun and didn't always check the gun, and Alec Baldwin had some kind of not just some offhand comment that he made in an interview, but he actually had real substantial knowledge that Halls was not adequately performing safety checks. Okay, I mean, and then he continued to act and continued to handle the gun and continued to play out the scene. Maybe. Now, I think it'll be interesting to see what the defense is to that argument. The most obvious defense would be, yeah, but not on that day of the incident. Not, Halls did check the gun that time. He didn't spin the barrel all the way, right? But Alec Baldwin might not have known that he didn't spin the barrel all the way. So that's going to be interesting. The armor was not. Now, this is another interesting argument. The state is now saying that Alec Baldwin needed to verify the armor. Okay, this is not an argument that shows up on social media. Everybody says, check the gun, check the gun. Alec didn't verify the gun. You always check to verify the gun. The gun handler is always responsible for verifying the gun, blah, 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 blah. Here we got a one level of indirection in that argument, that it's not that Alec Baldwin should have checked the gun. Alec Baldwin should have checked the armor. It's like, okay, that's a bit of an interesting and new argument. I guess my question on that one would be, how would Alec Baldwin do that? The state of New Mexico does not have any certification requirement for the armorer. So what would you be expecting Alec Baldwin to do that he didn't do? Was there some form that he should have checked? The state argued in one of the oral arguments not that long ago that, well, you can just take one look at Hannah Gutierrez and know that she's not qualified. And she's not, I mean, they literally said this. You could just take one look at her and know she's not qualified. She's not even old enough to own a gun in New Mexico. Now, she was, I don't get that argument. She was 24 at the time the incident happened. You can own a gun at the age of 24 in the state of Mexico, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure. So I don't get that argument. I don't get the argument that says you can just look at Hannah and know she's not qualified. She was tutored from a young age by her father, who's probably one of the most famous armorers in the industry. So I don't quite get that argument. Defendant knew he had a real gun in his hand. Yeah, I mean, he had a real gun, but it was supposed to be not. The bullets weren't real. The gun was real, but the bullets weren't real. He failed to participate in the standard and customary safety check. So SAG-AFTRA Safety Bulletin number 1 says that actors in the line of fire or near the line of fire have the armorer's responsibility is to make sure that actors near the line of fire have the opportunity to inspect, to observe the loading of the gun. I would say that's not a safety check. And Brian Carpenter said as much in the Hannah Gutierrez trial, that is done for a warm and fuzzy feeling on the part of people who are going to be in the line of fire, right? That makes sense, but it's not really a safety check in the sense that it's an actual part of the safety protocol. It's only done for a warm and fuzzy feeling, to give people a comfort level. He understood dummy rounds and live rounds could be easily commingled. So that could be an argument that says, the other thing I was going to show here is that this paragraph here, that to be convicted of involuntary manslaughter, the defendant had to be aware of the risk and continued to act. Okay, so bringing back up to this argument, he understood that dummy rounds and live rounds could be commingled. So he was aware of the risk that live rounds could be commingled and continued to act. Okay, so my argument against that one would be like, well, first of all, that's never happened in the history of that's never happened in the history of the movie industry. So is that a substantial and unjustifiable risk when it's someone else's responsibility to ensure that that doesn't happen? And it has never happened in the history of the movie industry. You know, you're expecting somebody to be on the lookout for something that's never happened. That's a little bit weird. Is it really a substantial and unjustified risk? If I drive to the grocery store, I'm aware that there's a non-zero probability that I could get into an accident and I could kill someone or die. Okay, but yet I continue to drive to the grocery store knowing that risk. But that's not a substantial and unjustified risk. I have to drive to the grocery store. I have to get food. I have to sustain my livelihood. Alec Baldwin, this is his profession. You know, acting is what he does to make a living. So I'm not sure that I buy number 5 and the violated decades old. Number 6. People have argued about number 6 all over the internet for the last 3 years. So I won't go into too much more detail on that. But anyways, so basically what the judge says is like, okay, the defense has got this stuff and the state's got this stuff, but really the jury is the finder of fact. Who's right? Which way is the jury going to go on this? Are they going to buy the arguments of number 8 or are they going to buy the arguments of number 10? And that's not something the judge can step in. It's the finder of fact that has to make that determination, which is the jury is the finder of fact. So therefore, it has to go to the jury, which means the motion in the opinion of the judge has to be denied. It's a finding of fact, not a finding of law, right? And so the fact as to which set of arguments the jury buys more is why the motion can't be denied. Now, my understanding of the law is that in order for a case to go to trial, the judge has to believe that the jury is capable of a unanimous verdict beyond a reasonable doubt of guilt if they believe the evidence. Okay, so if they believe the evidence, they're capable of finding a unanimous beyond a reasonable doubt verdict of guilt. And if that's not true, it shouldn't go to the jury. That's my understanding, layperson, not a lawyer, okay? But I've heard that before. And so, but what this judge is saying is that, the jury is capable, if the jury believes all of this stuff and the jury believes none of this stuff, then they are capable of finding unanimous beyond a reasonable doubt verdict if they believe all of this and none of that. But it's the jury's, the jury has to listen to all the evidence and go through the whole trial and deliberate, and they're the finder of fact. And so that's why the judge is ruling that this case cannot be dismissed and has to go to the jury. There's another part of this, which is that the defense is arguing that there's these inconsistent theories, that the state arguing the Hannah Gutierrez Reed trial, that it's the armor's sole responsibility to check the gun. And the judge also rejected that line of thinking in saying that they're not so inconsistent. The two theories aren't so inconsistent that this case deserves to be thrown out. There's two lines of guilt. They're not necessarily, they're complementary to each other, or there's two pathways to guilt. They're not inconsistent theories, like Hannah Gutierrez is guilty for these reasons and Alec Baldwin's guilty for these reasons, but they aren't two inconsistent theories. So the judge didn't buy that either. So that's where we're at, and it looks like we're going to be going to trial in less than 2 weeks here.